So far, we were considering the guidelines, right? The components of the good manufacturing practices, and we considered the guidelines regarding the premises, that is, how the location and the layout of the plant should be, what should be the materials of construction, everything about that. Regarding the personnel, that is, their personal hygiene, their training aspects. Then about the equipment, right? The qualification part, and then the materials, the packaging materials, that is their test specifications and all those things which we had talked about. Then sanitation and hygiene, that is cleaning of the equipment, cleaning of the premises, all that, the qualification and validation of the equipments. So today we'll go ahead and we'll take up one more component of the good manufacturing practice guidelines, and that is documentation. Now this is one of the very most important or the fundamental aspect of GMP. And in fact, it is said that documentation is an essential part of the quality assurance system in the GMP. Documentation is very important. That means any small activity that is performed in the manufacturing process, it has to be recorded. Okay, so documentation means recording. Whatever that is being done, it has to be recorded. What was done, at what time it was done, who did what was done, everything has to be recorded, right? So that is documentation. So the objective, of course, of documentation is to establish, control, monitor, and record all the activities which directly or even indirectly impact the quality of the products. So we have various types of documents, and here we'll of course consider the most important types of the documents which are to be maintained within the manufacturing premises by the company. Okay, so one of the starting documents, one of the important documents is the standard operating procedures, SOPs. Okay, so these SOPs give the step-by-step instructions for performing the operational task of the activities. Okay, then you have a document what is called as the test methods. Now the test methods provide step-by-step instructions for testing the supply materials, the products, the production related activities, example the environmental monitoring of the GMP facility. So that is test methods. That means how you are going to test the packaging material, the raw material, how you're going to test the drug, right, regarding its specifications. Then how you're going to test the in-process products. Like for instance, if tablet manufacturing is going on, initially you mix the drug and the excipients, you take a sample, okay, and then test for the content uniformity, that is whether the mixing is complete or not. Then suppose you prepare granules and take some sample of the granules, and let us say you have to find out the moisture. Then how do you perform that moisture content? Okay, so that test is going to be there. Not only that, not only the test on the in-process test or on the finished product, but even on the production related activities, that is the environment monitoring. Okay, like for instance, the room or the place where this manufacturing is going on. Suppose you have to find out the particles, the size of the particles and the number of particles in that air. So how do you collect that sample? And how do you find out the number of particles? Okay, so that test methods, even for instance, if you have to monitor the humidity, okay, in that manufacturing premises where this manufacturing is going on. So how do you perform that test for finding out the humidity? So those test methods, right? So those instructions have to be there. Then you have documents regarding the logbooks, of course. So logbooks, of course, are used to for documenting the operation, the maintenance and calibration of the piece of equipment. Now generally logbooks would give you a date, okay, that is when the some equipment was let us say calibrated. Like for instance, suppose you have to find out the RPM, okay, or if you have to find out the temperature, then whether that instrument which you are using, okay, to find out the temperature, to find out the humidity, to find out the RPM, okay, or to find out the moisture. So whether that instrument is calibrated and when it was calibrated, 6 months back, 3 months back, that's what that date is going to be there. So then you can say again it has to be calibrated after say 3 years, after 1 year, or after 3 months, like that. And when a piece of equipment was used, okay, yesterday it was used, day before yesterday, or last week, or 1 month when it was used. So that is basically logbook. So it has to do with the dates, basically logbooks, and when a piece of equipment was used or when it has calibrated. So logbooks are used to record critical activities like monitoring of the clean rooms. Okay, monitoring of the clean rooms, that means clean room means class 100 room, class 1000 room, class 10,000 room. That is with regards to the particle size in the air, in the atmosphere. Okay, so on the solution preparation, regarding of the deviations, change controls, and its corrective action assessment. Then you have very basic, very important record. One of the let us say the most important document, okay, or the record that is to be kept by the company is the batch processing record. A batch processing record should be kept for each batch which is processed or manufactured in the company. So it contains the following information: the name and batch number of the product. Okay, so just keep in mind, a company, let us say, is manufacturing a product, some tablets, let us say. So it produces batches of that product: batch 1, batch 2, batch 20, batch 30, 50, 100. Okay, so number of batches are produced and they are put into the market, but each of the batches which is produced, okay, so everything, every operation, every manufacturing aspect of that batch is to be recorded, and that is what is called as the batch processing record. So that is what we are saying: the name of the product which is manufactured, the batch number of that product, okay, batch number which you see in the market. Okay, generally on the labels you see the batch number along with the manufacturing date, along with the expiry date. So that batch number will identify the batch which, let us say, if it's later onward, suppose if it has some problem, so based on that batch number you can find out that. So the name and the batch number of the product, the date and time of commencement and completion of the stages during production. Okay, so what this means, that starting from step 1 till the last step, suppose if it is the manufacturing of let us say the tablets, so initially you mix, okay, the API with the excipients. Okay, so when that mixer was started, okay, at what RPM, for how long it went on doing the mixing, okay, and who was the person responsible. So everything has to be recorded: what samples were collected, how many samples were collected, how they were tested, okay, generally for the content uniformity, whether mixing was complete or not, mixing index has to be worked out. Then let us say you go for granulation. Okay, so when granulation started, whether it was at 11:05, whether it was at 12 noon, okay, so that time has to be recorded and when it was completed. So this is what we are saying: for each step, each and everything activity has to be recorded. Then further, these batch processing records would contain the identification of the operator who performed each significant step of the process and name of any person who checked these operations. Okay, so generally you see this is a two-step process. One person would be the operator, the other person would be checked by. So generally the entries, anything that is recorded is doubly ensured, doubly checked, at least by two persons. Okay, so this is basically the what documentation means. Okay, checked by, then prepared by, or verified by, things like that. So this is how two-step, at least two people will be involved. Then the batch number and the analytical control number, as well as the quantities of each starting material actually weighed. Okay, so actually on the balance, when you see how much is being weighed as per the master formula. Then further, the batch processing records would also contain a record of the in-process controls, okay, and the initials of the persons carrying them out and the results which are obtained. In-process controls, in-process, that means like for instance, in case of tablets, we are saying initially the powders are mixed, then granulation goes on, then granules are to be mixed with the lubricants, and then they are to be compressed. So that is all in process, and the tests which are to be performed are in process tests. And finally you get the tablets, that is the finished product. Okay, of course the finished product also has to be tested: what samples were collected, who collected those samples, how many samples were collected, and they were then sent to the quality control department. What were the evaluation results? So all that is to be recorded. Then the product yield, of course, the product yield, that means, let us say initially we start with 1000 kg of the powder mix, okay, and then let us say we put it into for granulation. So how much was the initial product mix, whether it was exactly 1000 kg or 100 gram upwards or downwards, and then let us say after granulation what was the weight, okay, after drying what was the weight, whether it was 900 kgs or what after granulation, okay, then you add the lubricants, and then the number of tablets, let us say if 5 lakh tablets are to be produced, suppose you have the master formula for producing 5 lakh tablets, but how many tablets were actually produced, whether 5 lakh or whether it was 4 lakh 99,000, okay, or whether it was 4 lakh 98,321 tablets, so that has to be recorded, okay. So that is what yield in the here means. So that is the product yield, and not only of the finished product but also of the intermediate steps, that yield also has to be recorded. So the product yield obtained at different and pertinent stages of manufacture. The notes on special problems, including the details for any deviation from the manufacturing formula and the processing instructions. Of course, we have the SOPs, okay, we have the master formula that this much of the ingredients has to be weighed and used for manufacturing. This is how you will process the ingredients, that manufacturing steps are there. But still, if there is a deviation, then why that deviation was there, how much deviation was there, who allowed for such a deviation, all that has to be recorded. Then similarly, you have the batch packaging records. Okay, so a batch packaging record should be kept for each batch or part of the batches process. So whenever possible, samples of the printed, again, everything has to be recorded when packaging is going on, just like in case of processing. So whenever possible, samples of the printed packaging materials used, including the specimens of the batch, coding, expiry, dating, and additional overprinting, all those are to be kept. Okay, specimen, or you can say the samples, okay, they are to be retained of the packaging materials, of the cartons, of the bottles, of the labels, all those are going to be retained by the QC department. Then the quantities, of course, of all the printed packaging materials and the bulk products issued, used, destroyed, returned to stock, okay, so how much labels were issued, how much were used, how much were destroyed, how much were wasted, how much have been returned back, all that, a record of all that has to be kept. Then approval of the persons responsible for the packaging operations, okay, who was the person who supervised these packaging operations, his initials would always be there. So we'll just stop there.